Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. My name is Erin Driver-Lynn, and it's my great privilege to direct HILT on behalf of President Faust, Provost Garber, and Vice Provost for Advances in Learning, Peter Bull. Where are you? There. I want to say just a few words about the logic of the day and the format of the day before handing it over to President Faust for welcoming remarks. First, Gus and Rita Hauser couldn't be here today, but we expect that they might be listening in from afar, and I wondered if you would help me thank them for their generosity and their vision and what they've been able to help us do for teaching and learning. So I see many people that I know, many familiar faces, and I see many people that I don't recognize, and that is even more gratifying. We had this experimental bring a buddy system for the invitations this year, and it worked incredibly well for widening the circle of people who are involved in our collective efforts to improve teaching and learning. So about the logic of the conference. This is very much an institutional moment. It's about now, things that are relevant in our context for our students. We are very intentionally internal with this conference, not because we love ourselves, not because we don't care about things externally, or not just for those reasons, but because there is so much to gain from learning from one another, and so much to gain from having discourse about different things going on with teaching and learning, some things that we might not agree with. And that kind of discourse and that sort of learning from one another, I believe is what it takes to build a community that is transforming education from the inside out. We have these motivating questions that have been part of these 3 HILT conferences. The first year was the launch year, and the question was, how do we catalyze and sustain innovation in teaching and learning? The second year, we had a different question. It was sort of a return to what are the essentials? What are the essentials of good teaching and learning? And with that, we asked a question in our registration, and we got a resounding response in terms of the data. The essential is student engagement. So this year, our conference planning committee, I think all of you are here. Thank you for your efforts. We landed on a theme that was, how do we think about student engagement in relationship to distance? How does distance affect student engagement? And by distance, we don't mean just online education, but distance in all its permutations: intellectual distance, psychological and emotional distance, spatial distance, and temporal distance. Said another way, if we want to benefit learning and optimize technology and pedagogy to benefit learning, when it means being more intimate, we should figure out how to do that. When we want to optimize pedagogy and technology to create distance, objectivity, to space time between lessons, then we should use those tools that we have to optimize learning in that way. So some of you might have seen scrolling on the loop on the screen, but when you came in, your responses to the question in this year's packet, which was, students are engaged in their learning when? And we analyzed those responses, and I'm not going to show you an exhibit this year, but it was pretty clear that there were some themes. The themes were not in the vein of students are engaged in their learning when they're happy. It was more students are engaged in their learning when they're challenged, when they own their educational experience, when what they're doing is relevant in the real world or relevant to them. And then most of all, when they care about their learning, and when professors and instructors care about them. We have 3 topics that we have had each of these years: instructional practice, science of learning, and institutional adaptation to the pressures to reform education. This year, instructional practice will be addressed in breakout sessions from 10:30 to 12. You've all been assigned to breakout sessions. We tried to give you your first choices, and if not, your second choices. The science of learning session in the afternoon is actually, we're kind of going to caveat that language of science of learning and research. This is really more like notes from the field. Let's try to learn from one another about some things that are going on right now, some studies that are underway, and engage around those issues. And institutional adaptation we're handling with 2 panels that bookend the day. A first panel hearing from faculty that will happen right after President Faust's remarks, and a second panel with people from leadership roles that are responsible for managing educational reform, and people who are relatively new to those roles. Finally, some practical points. It turns out that September and a Tuesday in September is a very big teaching day, and lots of people are going to be walking in and out all day long. We ask that to the extent possible, you try to use the natural transitions for when you need to leave. Second, we have a very accomplished group of presenters, but we are not going to tell you about their accomplishments in the interest of time. We're going to ask that you look at your registration packets and see the bios there. In your registration packets, you'll see on the right side things that are related to the conference, and on the left side, some university resources. We are, as always, trying to experiment with building connections across boundaries. And this is a teaching and learning conference. We are mindful of the fact that active learning is really important. At the same time, we're very mindful of the fact that you don't have very much time with these presenters. So we're going to be exploring different ways of hearing from your voices throughout the day. What I'm really saying is stay on your toes. You might be quizzed. We're also live streaming, and we'll be tweeting about the day's events. I've already seen some of you discover in your name tags that you have customized business cards. We ask that you look at these customized business cards and give them out, all 5 of them, throughout the day to someone that you don't know. Finally, there's a form, again on the right side of your packet, that asks you about your interest in future events. Fill those out. Put them into the basket at the registration table, where you will see the 3 wonderful prizes from Formaggio's Kitchen that Brooke will draw 3 names out of a hat at the reception shortly after the reception starts. And with that, I'll hand it over to President Faust.
Such a pleasure to welcome you all to the 3rd annual Harvard Initiative Learning and Teaching Symposium. I want to thank once again the Hausers who have made all of this ferment and interest possible at Harvard and supported it in such generous ways. And I also want to thank Peter Bohl and Erin Driver-Lynn and her team for their work in energizing the Harvard community and bringing us together this morning. Hundreds of faculty and staff from across the university in one place to talk about something they care deeply about, and to talk about it in ways as varied as their different academic interests. Could there be a better start to my day? Thank you for opening my week and day in this way, or opening my day in this way at least. I often speak about One Harvard, about using our distributed strengths to push the frontiers of knowledge. But that aim is rarely represented in such a vivid and forceful and powerful way as in this room. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking part in this university-wide conversation. We all have our paths into teaching. I entered the classroom in 1972 as a teaching fellow. I won't have a show of hands as to how many of you weren't even born then. But I came to understand over the next quarter century plus, and I think this is true no matter what your field or discipline, that teaching is always as much about learning as it is about imparting knowledge. And today you're going to learn from remarkably creative faculty and others across disciplines and across fields. You're going to have opportunities to share ideas, to assess their merits, to rethink, and to refine. And you will, I think, now that I know especially about those little cards you're going to hand out, you will start conversations here that will extend well beyond what happens today in this room and in this building. We hope that there will be new methods you discover, new approaches that can be adapted and adopted by peers around the world as well. Now, these gatherings, if you haven't attended one before, a HILT conference, generate memorable moments and unexpected insights. Rita spoke passionately in 2012 about wanting to, as she put it, blow things up. Now, I am certain she meant that figuratively. She has devoted her life to the rule of law, but I think it gives us some insight into how vehemently she hoped that we could see new pathways forward as we thought about the place of teaching at Harvard and at institutions like this all around the world. Youngmi Moon from the business school reminded us, and I quote her, never to underestimate the power of doing big collective things as an institution. Last year, Jennifer Roberts of the Department of History of Art and Architecture in the FAS spoke movingly about the art of teaching, wowing the room with her observations about the power of patience and her efforts to build that school among students in her art history courses. This became an article in Harvard Magazine that I think was one of the most widely shared of its articles last year. It's an article I cited as I addressed the new graduate students at the GSAS convocation this fall. It's been thrilling to witness the ways in which this conference and the HILT Initiative more generally have evolved and grown over the past years, and to see the diversity of projects and experiments that HILT has supported. Today we're focused on distance in time and space, between individual ability and skill levels. How does space and distance influence student engagement? How does it shape our ability to motivate and inspire students to learn and do more? How does it help us build communities, even as students grow as individuals? The answers to these very diverse and important questions can shape Harvard's approach to in-person and online learning, as well as models that blend the two together. As we explore ways of creating digital communities of learners, we also reaffirm our belief in the power of the personal and the proximal. Exchanges in the classroom, discussions in seminars, conversations in residential houses, encounters both planned and serendipitous across the campus, gatherings like this one today. I'm always struck by how the question of will face-to-face learning be replaced seems to emerge in face-to-face gatherings that people have devoted considerable sacrifice to attend. Motivation and inspiration, the relationship between individuals and communities, these topics are absolutely central to the work of the university and to the importance of strengthening the connections across it. As you move throughout the day, I ask that you consider questions of distance as they relate to your particular Harvard experience. We come to this institution in no small part because of one another, knowing that the inspiration from a colleague's insights or a student's questions can make all the difference. How can we work together to strengthen our shared commitment to learning, to the pursuit of truth, to the rigor of argument and evidence that binds us together? This initiative, so focused on the very heart of what we do, is an intellectual common space of sorts, a place that we can take up the important work of improving learning and teaching at Harvard and beyond. Thank you again for being part of it. Thank you for what your presence means about the commitment of this university to teaching and learning. And let me now turn the program back over to Erin Driver-Lynn with great thanks for all she does today and every day as she leads HILT. Thank you, Erin.